Hello, everyone. On behalf of Access Now and the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy, I have the honor to warmly welcome you all to our virtual reading event in celebration of and solidarity with Alaa Abd El Fattah. Alaa is an activist, technologist, writer, a visionary, and an Egyptian revolutionary whose illuminating vision and unflinching commitment to freedom and justice has inspired and guided many of us. Today, Alaa turns 40, and as we speak, he's spending another birthday in prison, confined to a small cell in conditions that we may likely never understand. We're gathering here today, joined by Alaa's friends, family, and loved ones, to celebrate Alaa's birthday and to read and share his ideas and writings compiled and published in a newly released book, You Have Not Yet Been Defeated. Many of the words that we will hear today were first written with a pencil and paper in a cell in one of Egypt's most notorious prisons, known as Tora prison. And the Egyptian authorities are desperately attempting to force Alaa into silence, and with him, intimidate all of us into fear and submission. But together, we can ensure that his voice is heard. And to echo what he once told us in a letter he wrote from his prison cell, and read it during RightsCon 2017. Alaa, you have not been defeated yet. The readings will be from selected texts from his book, read in both English and Arabic, followed by a 30-minute discussion to discuss Alaa's legacy and writings. And before we turn into the readings, I would like to first give the floor to our Executive Director, Brett Solomon, and Ramy Raoof, the Executive Director of Tahrir Institute, for their opening remarks.
Alaa, what to say? A leader, a visionary, a futurist, a man. I remember the first time when I met him, Alaa was thrilled that I could pronounce his name correctly. And actually, even if I didn't get the accent right, it was a name that I really could never forget. And I think many of us feel that way. Those of us who met Alaa in all those years when he was an activist, and a real luminary, a real visionary within our community. He came to Silicon Valley for RightsCon, the first RightsCon. I remember Jillian in New York introduced him to me, and he turned up with such power and such quiet determination. It was 2011, and he knew that when he got back on that flight from the US to Egypt, that he would be returning to a military tribunal. And the bravery of the man, how could I not return? He said, how could I not? He was very wary of the tech companies, of the tech sector, and he challenged them to do better. But he knew that the business model was the problem before I think any of us did. His vision was the empowerment of civil society, and here we are on the rise, standing firm, advocating for our digital rights, advocating for his release, as we've done every year and will continue to do so until you're free, Alaa. Happy birthday. Welcome to everybody who's engaged in this event. Thank you so much for allowing us to be part of it, and thanks to everybody who has put so much energy, his friends, his family, and his community, into ensuring that the legacy of Alaa Abd El Fattah continues and that his freedom is secured. Thank you very much.
الخميس الموافق 18 نوفمبر 2021. أنا اسمي رامي يعقوب، المدير التنفيذي لمعهد التحرير لسياسات الشرق الأوسط المعروف بتايمب. نيابة عن جميع القائمين على المعهد، أحب أشكركم على حضوركم اليوم للاحتفالية بعيد ميلاد الأربعين للناشط والصديق علاء عبد الفتاح. أحب أيضا توجيه الشكر لمنظمة أكسس ناو على الاستضافة المشتركة لاحتفالية اليوم مع معهد التحرير. بنحتفل أيضا بنشر وطرح كتاب أنت لم تهزم بعد لعلاء عبد الفتاح في الأسواق العالمية. ومع أننا النهاردة متجمعين الاحتفالية بعيد ميلاد وكتاب علاء، إلى أنه من المؤسف أنه كل الحاضرين مستمتعين بحريتهم وبيقروا وهيسمعوا أجزاء من كتاب علاء في الوقت ذاته حبيس زنزانته، مجرد من حقه في القراءة وممنوع عنه الكتب بشتى أنواعها. احنا متجمعين لاحتفالية بعيد ميلاد علاء، لكن علاء نفسه في عزلة وتحت ضغوط نفسية وجسدية شخص غيره ما يستحملهاش. بدل ما يكون مع ابنه ووسط أسرته وأصدقائه، علاء بيقضي عيد ميلاده بدون ساعة تعرفه الوقت. علاء مش هيكون عارف امتى عيد ميلاده بدأ وامتى عيد ميلاده انتهى. على المستوى الشخصي، كل ذكرياتي مع علاء لها طابع سياسي أو اجتماعي. مواقف كتير اختلفت مع علاء فيها، ومواقف اتفقت معاه عليها، لكن في النهاية أنا مدين لعلاء لأني اتعلمت منه حاجات كتير. ومن أهم الحاجات دي أن الدفاع عن المظلوم ليس أبدا بسبب عدالة قضيته، بل لأننا جميعا نستحق العدالة والحرية. ودفاعك عن المختلف عنك هو دفاع عن حريتك أنت أولا. للأسف الظروف لم تسمح لي أني أقول الكلام ده لعلاء، لكن أتمنى رسالتي توصل له يوما ما. بشكرك يا علاء على جدعنتك مع أصحابك بره وجوه السجن. كقبطي أنا بشكر علاء على توثيقه لأحداث ماسبيرو. كناشط سياسي أنا بشكر علاء على كل مبادرة وكل قضية سلط الضوء عليها. وكمصري بشكره على الثمن الغالي اللي بيدفعه كل يوم عشان الحلم اللي كل جيلنا حلم بيه. مرة كمان أحب أشكركم على حضوركم، وبشجعكم إنكم تشتروا نسخة من كتاب علاء الجديد أنت لم تهزم بعد. كل سنة وعلاء طيب، وكل سنة وأنتم طيبين.
Thank you very much, Ramy and Brett, for your opening notes. And with that, I would like to turn to the first reading of Alaa's book in Arabic by Dr. Ahdaf Soueif, who is Alaa's friend, comrade, and also his aunt.
أهلا بيكم وشكرا لاحتفالكم معنا بعيد ميلاد علاء. أنا أهداف سويف، أخت ليلى سويف مامة علاء عبد الفتاح، وبالتالي فأنا أعرف علاء وبحب علاء من زي النهاردة من 40 سنة، ومتابعة تضاريس حياته من حضانة لغاية النهاردة السجن. طبعا النهاردة عيد ميلاد مهم جدا لعلاء، لأنه هو بيكمل النهاردة 40 سنة. من 10 سنين لما كمل 30 سنة برضو احتفلنا بعيد ميلاده من غيره، لأنه كان في السجن. كان وقتها مسجون لقضية ماسبيرو اللي هو طلع منها بعد كده براءة، لكن من 10 سنين احتفلنا بعيد ميلاده في ميدان التحرير. النهاردة بنحتفل في أوض مقفولة علينا عبر الإنترنت، لكن برضو مع مجتمعنا وحبايبنا اللي بنستمد منهم دايما طاقة وأمل. كنت محتارة شوية أقرأ لكم إيه من كتابات علاء. كتاباته في ال10 سنين اللي فاتت دي متنوعة جدا، لكن قررت إن أنا هقرأ لكم من قطعة اسمها صورة للناشط خارج محبسه. علاء كتبها وهو داخل محبسه في سجن تورا في مارس 2017. كان بيقضي عقوبة 5 سنين سجن للتظاهر بدون ترخيص، وكان قضى أقل شوية من نص العقوبة وفضل له أكتر شوية من نصها، لكن كان بيكتب والكتابة بتطلع بره بشكل ما. والملفت للانتباه هنا هو قد إيه علاء بيظل مشغول بالشأن العام بالرغم من ظروفه هو، وبالشأن العام مش فقط المصري لكن أيضا الأممي أو في الحقيقة الأممي وبيشوف المصري على إنه جزء منه. صورة للناشط خارج محبسي. قضي الأمر، هزمنا وهزم معنا المعنى، وكما كنا في كل خطوة نتأثر بالعالم ونؤثر فيه، كانت هزيمتنا عرضاً وسبباً لحرب أوسع على المعنى وعلى جريمة أن يسعى أفراد لمجال عام عابر للحدود يسعون فيه لتقارب وتبادل وتواصل بل وتشاحن يسمح بفهم مشترك للواقع وبأحلام متعددة وبعوالم بديلة. أنا في السجن سعياً من السلطة لأن تجعل منا عبرة، فلنكن عبرة إذن، ولكن بإرادتنا. الحرب ضد المعنى لم تحسم بعد. الحرب ضد المعنى لم تحسم بعد في باقي العالم. لنكن عبرة لا فزاعة، لنتواصل مع العالم مجددا، لا للاستغاثة ولا للبكاء على أطلال أو لبن مسكوب، وإنما لاستنباط دروس وتلخيص خبرات وتكثيف مشاهدات عساها تفيد المناضلين في زمن ما بعد الحقيقة. عن نفسي لم أخرج من عقد الغضب إلا بدروس بسيطة، أهمها أن كل محطة من محطات الجدل والصراع في المجتمع فرصة للفهم وفرصة للتشبيك وفرصة للحلم وفرصة للتخطيط. حتى لو بدت لنا الأمور بسيطة ومحسومة وحددنا انحيازا مبكرا لأحد أطراف الصراع أو انصرافا مبكرا عن الأمر برمته، يظل انتهاز تلك الفرص لتعاطي وإنتاج المعنى ضرورة، بدونها لن نتخطى الهزيمة أبدا. تعلمت أن السلطة مجرد عائق، التحديات الحقيقية أممية، لذا تتضاعف أهمية انتهاز فرصة الجدل عندما يتعلق الصراع بأمور تتخطى الحدود. كنا ثم هزمنا وهزم معنا المعنى، ولكن لم نفن بعد وما قتل المعنى. ربما كانت هزيمتنا حتمية، ولكن الفوضى الحالية التي تجتاح العالم سيتمخض عنها عاجلا أم آجلا عالم جديد، عالم سيحكمه ويديره بالطبع المنتصرون، ولكن لن يقيد الأقوياء ويصوغ هوامش الحرية والعدل ويحدد مساحات الجمال وإمكانات العيش المشترك إلا ضعفاء تمسكوا بالانتصار للمعنى حتى بعد الهزيمة. وده طبعا اللي علاء مع غيره بيعملوه ومستمرين فيه. قلقنا حاليا إنه هو بعد سنتين محبوس دلوقتي بدون ما يبقى عنده فرصة إنه هو يقرأ ولو حتى كتاب من مكتبة السجن، ابتدى يحس إنه تفكيره مش منتج زي ما كان وزي ما هو متعود. عموما دعواتكم، وكل سنة وإحنا كلنا طيبين. أشكركم تاني.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soueif, for joining us and for the reading. And for all of you, this is a good reminder to join the global call for free Alaa and to save Alaa and call for immediately releasing him from his prison. This is also a good reminder, and I would encourage everybody who's watching us to buy Alaa's book. It's released today also in the US market. You'll find the links to where buy his books in the event description on YouTube. We'll move now to our second reading. It will be in English, read by Wafa Moustafa, a Syrian journalist and activist.
My name is Wafa Moustafa. I'm a Syrian journalist and activist. The 18th of November marks Alaa Abd El Fattah's 40th birthday. On this occasion, to honor Alaa and to remind all of us of what an inspiration he is, I will read parts of his book, You Have Not Yet Been Defeated. I will read first a passage from an article Alaa wrote in the kiosk of solitude at Al-Duqi police station in the year 1920. The article titled 5 Metaphors on Healing, in the passage I will read titled Hunting. They will not eject you from history as long as you can still speak. They will not banish you to the past as long as you can still listen. But which prison do you inhabit? Hunt the dreams of your comrades and the nightmares of your enemies. Live in the future that never came. Be a specter, a memory, a herald. Remind them that the current state was not inevitable until it came to be. Do not occupy yourself with the question of why this very possible future failed. Leave the victorious to grope for answers. Be the question and do not heed your impotence. A ghost has no need for material presence or action. You just need to shimmer. The second part I will read is from an article Alaa wrote in Tora prison in the year 2014 on his first date of strike and just days before his father, Alaa Abd El Fattah, passed away. This text resonated with me as my family and I have been for years fighting to find the truth of what happened to my father, Moustafa, who has been forcibly disappeared by the Assad regime for more than 8 years. The text titled, I've Reached My Limit. My repeated imprisonment is a chapter in my family's history of struggle. Together, we build on the work and struggle of the thousands who never give up and the millions who sometimes rise up. Today, the chain is broken. Sana is in prison and needs someone to look after her instead of her looking after me. Manal struggles alone to protect Khalid from the consequences of my imprisonment and the lack of income. Mona and my mother take turns to care for my father, who is unable to defend me in court. So I ask for your permission to fight today, not only for my freedom, but for my family's right to life. Starting from today, I will deny my body food until I am allowed to stay the night by my father's side, as his body fights to hold on. There is no dignity for a body that is deprived of the embrace of its loved ones. I ask for your prayers. I ask for your solidarity. I ask you to continue where I have stopped, to fight, to dream, to hope. Happy birthday, Alaa.
Thank you very much, Wafa, for this touching reading. And with that, I would like to go to our third reading of today, read by Ramy Raoof, an Egyptian technologist. It will be read in Arabic.
أنا اسمي رامي رؤوف. علاء صديقي واعتبر أخويا وشريكي من سنين طويلة في الأفكار، في التكنولوجيا، في السياسة، في حلم التغيير، في المطبخ. حاجات كتيرة اتعلمتها منه وحاجات كتيرة عملناها سوا. علاء بقاله فترة في السجن بسبب أحلامه وآرائه، والأسبوع ده بيتم عيد ميلاده ال40 في السجن. التنين البامبي هو اسم علاء وسط أصحابه أونلاين، وهو وحشنا جدا فوق الوصف. النهارده أنا اخترت 3 نصوص من كتابات علاء أشاركها معاكم في أمسية قراءة كتابه الجديد، وأحب أشكر كل المنظمين على الدعوة وإتاحة المساحة ديت. كل فقرة بتعبر عن جوانب معينة في شخصية علاء وحياته. وأشجعكم قبل ما أبدأ القراءة إن أنتوا تشتروا كتاب علاء. المقالات اللي أنا مختارها على مدار آخر 10 سنين، واحدة من 2011 2016 و2017، وهشارك معاكم أجزاء من كل مقالة بالعربي، والكتاب هو ترجمة كل كتابات علاء على مدار آخر 10 سنين بالإنجليزي. نصف ساعة مع ابني خالد، 19 ديسمبر 2011. نفرح بالزفاف لأنه زواج، نحزن في الجنازة لأنه الموت، نحب المولود لأنه إنسان ولأنه مصري، ينفطر قلبنا على الشهيد لأنه إنسان ولأنه مصري. نذهب للميدان، نكتشف أننا نحب الحياة خارجه، ونكتشف أن حبنا للحياة مقاومة. نجري نحو الرصاص لأننا نحب الحياة، وندخل السجن لأننا نحب الحرية. البلد هو ما نحب وما نحيا، ما يفرحنا ما يحزننا. لو سقطت الدولة لن يبقى فقط الميدان، ستبقى محبة الغريب، وكل ما دفعنا للميدان وكل ما تعلمناه في الميدان. الحب خالد والحزن خالد، والميدان خالد والشهيد خالد، والبلد خالد. أما دولتهم فلساعة، ساعة فقط. في ذكرى يناير 23 يناير 2016. لكن هناك شيئا واحدا لا زلت أتذكره، شيئا واحد أعرفه، أن الشعور باتساع أفق ممكنا كان حقيقيا. ربما كان اعتقادنا أننا على وشك لمس الأفق بأيدينا ساذجا، ولكن اعتقادنا بإمكانية أن نعيش في عالم مختلف لم يكن غباء، كان إمكانية حقيقية، أو على الأقل هذا ما أتذكره. صورة للناشط خارج محبسه 17 مارس 2017. تفتح وعينا على الانتفاضة الثانية. خطونا أول خطوات تزامنا مع تساقط القنابل على بغداد. نظرنا حولنا فوجدنا أشقاء عرب يصرخون ليس على حساب كرامتنا، وحلفاء في الشمال يهتفون ليس باسمنا، ورفاق في الجنوب ينشدون عالم بديل ممكن. أدركنا أن العالم الذي ورثناه إلى زوال، كما أدركنا أننا لسنا وحدنا. أيقنا محورية تكنولوجيا المعلومات في صياغة العالم الجديد، وأدركنا انكشافنا أمام الاحتكارات العالمية. لذا تبنينا البرمجيات الحرة مفتوحة المصدر كضرورة لتطوير المجتمع وتحقيق استقراريته، وكأداة رئيسية في تحديث الاقتصاد وإنهاء تبعياته. بدأنا بالدعوة، دورنا على كل الجامعات، طلبة وحاضر أساتذة، نظمنا مؤتمرات ثم تدريبات، استهدفنا كل الفئات من مدرسين مادة الحاسب الآلي بالمدارس الإعدادية لطلبة الهندسة للقضاة والصحفيين. ربطنا بين نقدنا للآثار السلبية لمنظومة الملكية الفكرية على البرمجيات وأثرها على صياغة الأدوية، فوجدنا أنفسنا منخرطين في قضايا اجتماعية كالحق في الصحة. ربطنا بين نقدنا للشركات الاحتكارية ونقد منظومة العولمة على أسس الليبرالية الجديدة، فوجدنا نفسنا في تقاطع مع طيف واسع من النشطاء حول العالم. احتلت تقنين التكنولوجيا صدارة أولوياتنا، انخرطنا في تعريب المصطلحات ثم ترجمة واجهات البرمجيات، كما علمنا الحاسوب قواعد العد والهجاء والصرف، صممنا خطوط، طورنا برمجيات، بنينا مواقع إلكترونية. مع اهتمام بالتوطين وهندسة اللغة، زاد اهتمامنا باللغة والثقافة العربية، فشبكنا مدونين العرب وشجعنا الفنانين والكتاب والباحثين والمترجمين على إتاحة الإبداع وما تحت أيديهم من إرث بشكل مفتوح وحر. وأثناء العمل على دعم المحتوى العربي على الشبكة، اصطدمنا سريعا بقيود الرقابة ومحاولات محاكمة وتكفير وحبس الكلمة. هكذا انضممنا لصفوف المدافعين عن حرية الرأي والتعبير والعقيدة وعن حرية الصحافة وحرية الأكاديمية. أسسنا شبكات إلكترونية وحركات سياسية. أسسنا أيضا شركات تقدم حلول وخدمات. شكرا جدا لكم.
Thank you very much, Ramy. And now we'll move to our final reading for today in English, read by Melody Patry, the Advocacy Director of Access Now.
Lest you think me too pessimistic, I will admit that this dystopia is as probable as the utopian vision that insists the killer drones will turn out to be like the good Terminators, that Facebook will defeat fake news with a truth bot and its human companions who are happily employed in glorious state-of-the-art call centers as content moderators, that Elon Musk will solve the world energy problem, Bill Gates will end hunger, Google will find a cure for cancer, and Uber or Foxconn's effect on labor rights is irrelevant because we'll all be paid a basic universal income, have unlimited credit lines, or run our own Bitcoin mining operation. The counter-revolution never happened. The naive dreams of early internet communities and the free software movement are not lost, they have just been updated, cleaned up, and stripped of any hint of ideology to make them more universal. And no, the fact that nobody pays tax anymore is not a threat to democracy because they all give so much to charity. Yes, this utopia is probable too, as probable as the vision of a coalition between Trump, Sisi, Duterte, Orban, Modi, Erdogan, Putin, Bin Salman, and who knows, maybe even Le Pen, leading the civilized world into a new age of prosperity and security and stability and sustainable growth. Yes, it could happen. Millions upon millions believe it, and they can't be all wrong, right? However, you do have a chance to influence where in the broad spectrum between these equally unlikely or likely scenarios the future lies. Yes, on the simple question of how to finally retire the hashtag #FreeAlaa, you have little, if any, agency. But on the question of whether the internet is a space in which we come together to enjoy, assert, practice and defend universal rights and freedoms, you have a lot of agency. Unlike me, you have not been defeated. I don't have much to say by way of advice. I am, after all, out of touch and slightly outdated. The best I can do is repeat themes I used to touch upon when participating in conferences like these in the past. The last time was 2011, I think. Fix your own democracy. This has always been my answer to the question, how can we help? I still believe it's the only possible answer. Not only is where you live, work, vote, pay tax and organize the place where you have the more influence, but a setback for human rights in a place where democracy has deep roots is certain to be used as an excuse for even worse violations in societies where rights are more fragile. I trust recent events made it evident that there is much that needs fixing. I look forward to being inspired by how you go about it. Don't play the game of nations. We lose much when you allow your work to be used as an instrument of foreign policy, no matter how benign your current ruling coalition is. We risk much when human rights advocacy becomes a weapon in a Cold War, just as the Arab revolutions were lost when revolutionaries found themselves unwitting and unwilling recruits in proxy wars between regional powers. We reach out to you not in search of powerful allies, but because we confront the same global problems and share universal values, and with a firm belief in the power of solidarity. Defend complexity and diversity. No change to the structure of or organization of the internet can make my life safer. My online speech is often used against me in the courts and in smear campaigns, but it isn't the reason why I'm prosecuted. My offline activity is. My late father served a similar term for his activism before there was a web. What the internet has truly changed is not the political dissent, but rather social dissent. We must protect it as a safe space where people can experiment with gender and sexual identities, explore what it means to be gay or a single mom or an atheist or a Christian in the Middle East, but also what it means to be black and angry in the US, to be Muslim and ostracized in Europe, or to be a coal miner in a world that must cut back on greenhouse gas. The internet is the only space where all different modes of being Palestinian can meet. If I express this precariousness in symbolic violence, will you hear me out? Will you protect me from both prosecution by the establishment and exploitation by the well-funded fringe extremists? Assert your right to be a creator, not a consumer. We love tech because it allows us to be performers in our own spectacle, the storyteller in our own narrative, and the philosophers of our own discourse. Not an eyeball for advertisers or a demographic for posters. Keep it that way, please. Keep it that way. Written in Torah prison, delivered on 13 April 2017.
Thank you very much, Melody. This was Alaa's keynote speech at the RightsCon in 2011 in Silicon Valley. And this is when Alaa learned that he is actually summoned to the military prosecutor. I'm really grateful for all of those of you who joined us in the readings, Dr. Soueif, Ramy, Wafa, and Melody. And now I would like to invite our speakers who are joining us live. We have today joining us Jillian York, the Director for International Freedom of Expression at EFF, and Alaa's friend. Mohammed Najm, the executive director of SMEX, and Lina, Attallah, a journalist and co-founder of Mada Masr, who published actually many of Alaa's writings that we listen to today and are published in his book. And yeah, could you please turn on your cameras so we can have you all on screen? Great. I hope our viewers are seeing what I'm seeing. So thank you so much again for joining us. And personally, many of the readings we heard today and also read in his book were touching on many different levels. On a personal level, on an emotional level, it touches upon the intersection of our work, on technology, on the politics of our region, and also pretty much our future. And one thing that keeps striking me is that how far-sighted Alaa has been. Many of the issues we're still grappling with today are issues that he predicted back in 2011 and prior. And I know that many of you here today are either friends of Alaa or his colleagues. You've worked with him before. So I want to give you first the floor maybe to introduce yourself, your connection to Alaa, and maybe share one thing that has touched you and inspired you in being friends and in contact with Alaa. Perhaps I can direct the question first to Jillian, and then we take it from there.
Thank you, Marwa, and thank you everyone for the wonderful readings. There's a lot that I could say. It weighs heavy on my mind today, of course, as many days. I was struck by Brett's reading. I remember that particular speech at that particular conference very, very clearly. I think I don't have it in front of me, but from my memory, Alaa got up on stage and said, what technology do you think was used most in Tahrir Square? And people were standing and guessing, this one, that one, phones, whatever. And he said, no, rocks and clubs. And that was, both a demonstrative of his sense of humor as well as his reality. He went from that RightsCon where he was staying on my sofa straight back to prison, as we've said, knowing that his son was about to be born. And just the absolute heaviness of that, I think, like I said, weighs heavily on me today as all days, but I wish him the happiest birthday, and hopefully next year's will be much happier with many more to come.
Thank you, Jillian. And I'm conscious that we are joined not by a very happy celebration, but I hope for next year we will celebrate Alaa with us and he will be with us on this Zoom call, or maybe hopefully in person. Maybe Najm, do you want to share with us your first impressions and maybe a bit about your story with Alaa?
Sure. Well, first, I want to wish Alaa a happy birthday, and I really hope that next year he will be joining his life as a normal person outside all these challenges. Well, every time we do an event about Alaa, I see things from a new perspective, maybe, or a different perspective. I mean, I think now about like if I look back at all the political incidents in Egypt back then, they were really much faster than how the technology was even evolving and developing. And Alaa was really trying to follow up on these both ends. And he was doing a great job, actually. And now I'm looking back at this last 10 years history. I mean, thinking about RightsCon 2011, because I also was there, Jillian was there. And how much Alaa, he has really accomplished a lot of things. When he was free or in his cell, his writings and his opinion, I mean, when I heard now Melody saying that, Alaa mentioned that he's not updated on things, but you know what? I feel like us, the people who have been following all these tech issues and we've been like in our free life and developments, I feel like we are stuck in the limbo. We are stuck in the limbo in the last 10 years in terms of like what has happened in the technology. And I heard now Alaa's speech from 2011, and it's still so relevant, and it's still so important to listen to that speech and to think about all these issues from this perspective.
Thank you, Najm. And I want you to hold on to that thought, given that we all work on, I mean, at least the three of us work on digital rights issues. And I would love to think a bit further about Alaa's vision and what we can do to carry out and celebrate his legacy regarding technologies that impact our communities. And I will now move it to our third speaker, Lina, if you would like to share with us your first impressions and also your story with Alaa.
Hi, and yeah, sharing everyone's sense of sadness that Alaa is not amongst us for his 40th birthday. But if you want an anecdote, because I think this transcends our friendship and all of that, maybe I would start from the last hearing of his current case that's being heard at court, where, you know, we were so privileged to see him for a full couple of hours, just because the judge went into recess. And while at the beginning of the recess, Alaa was quite angry, and as we've read and saw and, you know, news spread around him, that it hasn't obviously been easy for him in the last time, especially with severance of communication and so many difficult imprisonment conditions. Halfway through our conversations and our convening around him, all of a sudden he became the Alaa we know him. Fierce, intellectual, polemical. We started discussing how he's been speaking to his inmates about post-structuralist theory and how this is a different way to look into how look into state formations. At which point we started discussing our divergent point of views about Foucault, about the Anthropocene, and so on and so forth, and all of this and none other than a tribunal and him being inside his dock. And this is not surprising in a way. I do not like to express astonishment at Alaa's deep depression from what's been going on. It's only normal. But this exists hand in hand with the convivial, fierce Alaa, you know, who the moment he has an audience, the moment he has a public, he will always have so many things to say. And one last thing I'd like to say, it's one thing to read Alaa's book as with a lens of sadness because he's absent, because this book was conceived by a collective of friends and colleagues in his absence. And it's another thing to also read it with a lens of inquiry, because the book has a lot of richness. To give you a very quick example, when we at Mada received the triplet article on Uber and the labor economy, we were so surprised at the level of sobriety of that's there in his understanding of the evolution of the labor economy, whereas he's been completely segregated from this environment. So I have to say it's been fascinating to the level that it has driven much of our editorial strategy of how we want to think about the labor economy and how we want to cover it at Mada, where he has been published. So this is how I like to consume Alaa's writings, even if he's not amongst us, even if he is a prisoner.
Thank you, Lina, and I couldn't agree more. Reading his book, there's so much intellectual richness in there that makes you as a reader think and rethink how you perceive and interact with the world and engage with it. And so I'm really glad that you emphasized on this point. And I actually want to stay with you for a bit more because there has been a lot of developments regarding Alaa's case. We know he was detained towards the end of 2019 in September, and he was put on pre-trial detention without charge or trial. until pretty much recently. He was brought again. His pre-trial detention was renewed without his presence. And this is when we learned, sadly, that his mental health is deteriorating, and his family sounded the alarm. And then he appeared in a completely new case, I believe for spreading false news. And I want maybe if you can share with us an update on Alaa's situation for those in the audience who maybe are not familiar or not following very closely his case.
So the legal procedure that Alaa is going through right now, which is giving us the privilege of seeing him in court, is that his initial case for which he's been in pretrial detention has been, as they say, copied to another case, and basically two of the charges of the original case, which are basically spreading false news and misuse of social media, which are typical charges that a lot of political dissidents are facing today in Egypt. So those two charges are what's there in the new court case, and currently this case has been heard, whereas the original case is still being held, and he's being held on pre-trial detention for it. It's been more than 2 years, which is unlawful, but that's irrelevant in our context, unfortunately. And the current case, which is being finally heard, for which he has been indicted, we are expecting a verdict in it on the 20th of December. And yeah, we don't have high hopes. In all 3 hearings that we've attended over the last month, there has been just simply a void, in the sense that it's been 3 hearings where the lawyers are direly trying to take from the judge the case file, and the judge not allowing them to copy the case file, just allowing them to have a look at it. And the case file is 1,500 words long, which doesn't 1,500 pages long, which makes it impossible for the lawyers to just consult it in situ. So just all of these anecdotes is to tell you about the legal void that's being housed in this, space of justice, supposedly, and of which Alaa is being one of many victims in Egypt.
Thank you, Lina. I want to go back to Jillian and Muhammad. So many of the readings we heard today and Alaa's writings are, as I said before, they have predicted pretty much our present time problems regarding technology and how that evolved and how it interacts with our societies and infringes in many cases on our human rights and fundamental freedoms. And I thought maybe a way for us to celebrate his legacy, because we want to make sure that his ideas are alive. As Lina said, when Alaa has an audience, he's always willing and ready and eager to engage. And the Egyptian authorities, those who are imprisoning him know that very well. And because of that, they deprived him of having access to books or exercising outside, and pretty much losing that human connection. And so maybe I would love to discuss with you, how can we support Alaa, how can we carry out his legacy, and how can we engage in our communities in a way that takes this vision forward. And maybe I would start with Muhammad.
Yeah, Marwa, I mean, that's the most important part. I mean, basically, when we're busy in our daily struggles, we forget, all of us sometimes, that Alaa is a human being. I mean, he's suffering, a friend suffering, and we imagine him sometimes. Alaa is becoming an idea. I mean, it's been so many years that we didn't see him, and he's becoming this idea, this perfection of ideas when it comes to our best values of technology and politics, etc. Well, Alaa is not okay. I mean, he's in bad shape, and his case is our duty as entities, human rights groups, digital rights organizations, advocates, And I mean, we should knock all doors. We are trying. I mean, we should make his situation better. I mean, unfortunately, looking at the politics in Egypt and the judiciary system is kind of non-existing, and it's all Game of Thrones kind of judiciary system and politics mixing up all together. So what can we do in all that? This is the question that we need to answer to make his situation better.
Thank you, Najam. Jillian?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. There's a piece in the book called The Birth of a Brave New World between Uber and the Luddites. It's on page 282 of the PDF. I don't know if that's helpful to anyone if you're reading along at home. But I was really struck by this piece. I think that over the past few years, you know, a lot of the conversation, not amongst our friends and allies, not amongst civil society, but amongst the ruling class, those who make the decisions about policies in technology at companies and in governments, have really strove to take the politics out of these conversations, to forget that these are holistic issues that require holistic solutions, and to look for, I guess, what I think Alaa would agree is techno-solutionist problems, to really deeper societal divides. And so, you know, I come back to what he said about fix your own democracies. I was on a panel last week in Berlin at the Heinrich Böll Foundation about also about the book. Thank you to them for doing that. And you know, there was conversation about what needs to happen in Germany. And I think that, you know, it's really like the politics that we're seeing around the internet right now are indeed very not just apolitical, but they've taken out this you know, this very core issue by, you know, what we're seeing in Germany, for example, is a law that's been criticized by the United Nations that absolutely has harm to people living in countries like Egypt, countries throughout the world, and yet, you know, these solutions keep being proposed in these very U.S., European, Western-centric ways. The last time I spoke with Alaa was when he was briefly out in 2019, I think it was, and we texted a bit, and I was deeply pessimistic at that time, and he reminded me to not forget that we have to find political solutions to our problems. I think he recommended some things for me to read, and I wish, you know, I've written about this before, but I wish that those messages were not disappearing ones, and yet, of course, they have to be for safety. So I think, you know, what we need to do, what our movement needs to do is, you know, stop looking for techno-solutionist answers to all of our societal problems, and to start organizing in a deeper way than we have been, especially over the past couple of years during the pandemic.
Thank you, Jillian. I mean, one thing that always strikes me in Alaa's approach to all of those issues we're talking about is that he is, at the end of the day, an internationalist, someone who believes that solutions should go beyond nation states. And maybe I'm wrong, but the way I see that this space, this digital space and the internet, the future of it is also going in a very nationalistic direction, where governments are trying to build their own internet spaces, or trying to wall off their infrastructure and the online space from the rest of the world for their own political purposes. And I very much agree with what you shared regarding how to overcome that, and how we can now fight for a space that remains open and global, as it should be. And maybe before, I want to pass it to Lina as well, if you want to share from your perspective what we need to do in celebration of Alaa's legacy, thinking of our future, or of our present time, but also of our future.
I think one of the most important things to in my own perspective, is to keep thinking with Alaa, to keep debating his thoughts, not to stop at the idea that he's a prisoner without agency, absent, not here. There's such a fantastic document of his in our hands that opens up, an array of possibilities of thinking together on all the main issues, including those that Jillian just mentioned about the techno-determinism, politicizing technology, but also thinking the world we live in. Also alongside what you mentioned, Marwa, to what extent is the nation state central to our thinking? What are other configurations we can think about? And what kind of space does the internet play within these configurations? So I think the most important thing is to keep thinking with Alaa, to keep imagining what would Alaa think, and then do things accordingly. And I happen to be privileged enough for many reasons, including, being able to join this panel and not, having had to share his fate in prison. But also my main privilege is I operate in this space of knowledge production, which is really what Alaa's project is about. If he worked in technology, it was about creating this infrastructure that makes dialectical and intelligent knowledge possible and shared and spreads and not engineered from centers of power. So I feel like I don't even have the luxury of losing hope now that I have this space of Mada that is, to a great extent, working on thinking actively with Alaa. So I'd say this is a very central thing, to just basically think with Alaa.
Thank you, Lina. And we hope that today's event is part of this thinking process, and not only just to share solidarity with him. I am conscious of time, so I would love to give each one of you a moment to maybe reflect with our audience what they can do to support Alaa. What are the things that each one of us individually, but also in our organizations, as Lina mentioned, each one of us sits in a place within a certain organization or in society where we can support and help. We know that the situation in Egypt isn't necessarily the most optimistic, but we have no option but to remain hopeful that Alaa will be released together with the other tens of thousands of political prisoners in Egypt held in captivity for exercising their fundamental rights. And so I will pass it first to Jillian, and then to Nejm, and then to Lina for your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Marwa. I don't have the solutions for the political situation, but I do feel really, really strongly about his words, and I think what Lina said and what Mohammed said, yeah, absolutely is true. So do read his words, share them, say his name, say the names of other prisoners, and fix your own democracies.
Yes, I mean, fight injustice in your community, support the underprivileged people. Those are really also important in Alaa's work. And I really call everyone, like, we really need to create a bigger coalition to support Alaa to make his situation better and for his release. With all of us here, and I hope more from the audience who are ready to support.
I don't know what can be done for Alaa's case in particular, specifically for his release. And I feel sometimes bad that, the seeing of desire becomes to get him books in prison. I'd like to always be able to be ambitious about, his possible release. I fathom about the possibilities of a verdict coming out on the 20th of December, where he's ruled innocent, but that also would not mean, unfortunately, that he would be released, because there is another still case that he's being imprisoned for. But the one thing I'll say is that, and this is something that Nejm mentioned, it's easy in the world we live to be in the optic of self-redemption. We're okay. We become less and less aware of those who are invisible, those who were taken away from us behind bars. And I think just resisting this this consciousness of self-redemption by constantly, reminding that our lives will only be better if all of us are out and with each other. And whatever ensues of this sensibility in terms of what we write, in terms of what we think, in terms of any action we would do for those of us who are not amongst us, that I think would be the way to support Alaa, and also that would be the world that Alaa would want to come out for.
That's an excellent point, Lina. So thank you very much. And as all of you said, our work does not end here. And there are different ways where we can show support between now and the 20th of December, his trial date. Use the hashtag Save Alaa and hashtag Save Alaa, Free Alaa. Speak to your representatives if you have one, if you live in a democratic state. Use that power. You have a voice, use it. Use your online space if you don't have that democratic power. Speak about Alaa's case. Let the conversation build up to the trial date. And of course, I again encourage you all, if you have not purchased and read his book, to do so. It's available in the US, it's available in the UK, and here in Europe, and pretty much I hope everywhere, should be everywhere soon around the world. The links to buy to purchase the book are in the event description. I'm also happy to share with you a page that went live today in support of Alaa that can also direct you to different actions you can take to support and stand in solidarity with Alaa. The link is also on the event description on YouTube. And again, before we conclude our session today, thank you so much for everybody who joined us, for Jillian, Najem, and Lina, and also for the readers who joined us with their touching readings, and for everybody who is joining us from different parts of the world and continue to speak about Alaa and stand in solidarity with him. I wish you all well, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.